Section 1. The Illusion Begins. June 5, 1944, 11 Fuddy Thruh, southeast England. A cold wind cuts across a muddy field where rows of tanks sit in silence, their dark shapes looming against the night. A British corporal crouches beside one of them, tightening a rope around its turret. His fingers move quickly, nervously, because if this rope slips, the tank will sag, and if the tank sags, the illusion dies. He exhales into his gloves and looks up at the sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the clouds, German reconnaissance aircraft are watching. You can almost feel the pressure in the air, not from artillery, not from engines, from the knowledge that this entire war, the fate of Europe, may depend on whether a rubber tank looks real enough in moonlight. The corporal pats the side of the tank before moving on. It gives slightly under his hand, because it isn't steel, it's air. And the man who designed this madness, this beautiful, ridiculous deception, is miles away in a dimly lit operations room, studying maps and listening to radio chatter with the calm focus of a chess grandmaster. Lieutenant Colonel Dudley Clarke. Not a general, not a battlefield commander, not even a man most soldiers would recognize if he passed them in the corridor. But tonight, his creation is about to deceive Adolf Hitler himself. Clarke doesn't look like a master of deception. Thin frame, sharp cheekbones, a habitual cigarette resting between his fingers. He looks more like a university lecturer than an officer entrusted with the greatest lie in military history. The room around him hums softly. Radios crackle, typewriters murmur. Officers move with quiet urgency, careful not to disturb his concentration. On the wall hangs a massive map of southern England. Red pins cluster thickly around Kent and Sussex. Arrows point toward the Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point between Britain and France. The most obvious invasion route. The one the Germans expect. And that is precisely why Clarke has spent months ensuring it looks real. Any new intercepts, he asks without looking up. A signals officer checks his notes. Berlin still believes the primary force is assembling under General Patton, sir. Clarke allows himself the faintest smile. George S. Patton, the most feared Allied general in German intelligence assessments, the man they believe will lead the invasion. Except Patton isn't preparing to invade anywhere. He is standing on stages, visiting camps, inspecting troops that don't exist. Because Clarke has built him a phantom army. They call it the First United States Army Group, FUSAG. On paper, it is the largest Allied force ever assembled in Britain. 11 divisions, hundreds of thousands of men, enough armor to smash straight through Calais and into the heart of Germany. In reality, a skeleton staff of radio operators, sound technicians, stagehands, and mechanics, and miles of inflatable hardware. Earlier that afternoon, a truck rumbled down a narrow country road toward a secluded field. Inside its canvas-covered bed lay what looked like enormous rolled-up carpets. 2 men jumped down when it stopped. "Let's get this circus set up," one muttered. They unrolled the first bundle across the grass. It spread flat, lifeless. Then the pump started. The shape rose slowly, awkwardly, until a Sherman tank stood where there had been nothing minutes before. Canvas skin stretched tight. Painted shadows gave the illusion of armor plates. Rubber tracks sagged just enough to appear weighted. From a distance, convincing. From 500 feet in the air, indistinguishable from the real thing. The men stepped back to inspect their work. "Think Jura will buy it?" one asked. The other shrugged. "If he doesn't, we're all dead anyway." They moved on to the next. And the next, By nightfall, an entire armored division appeared to be parked in that field. Except no engines ever turned over, no crews slept inside, no fuel trucks arrived. Just air, paint, and theater. Clarke understood something most generals did not. Wars are fought with bullets and blood, yes, but they are also fought in the mind. And the German mind was obsessed with logic. They believed the Allies would invade at the shortest crossing point. They believed Patton would lead it. They believed buildup in southeast England meant only one thing. So Clarke gave them exactly what they expected to see. Fake landing craft lined the coasts. Wooden aircraft filled airfields. Entire divisions moved camps, leaving behind tracks deliberately carved into the earth. Radio operators broadcasted endless streams of fake logistical chatter, supply requests, unit movements, coded messages meant to be intercepted. The deception was so meticulous that German analysts in Berlin began building reports around it, sketching maps, assigning divisions to counter it. They weren't guessing. They were convinced. Late that night, Clarke stands again before the map. The room feels now heavier. The real invasion is only hours away. Normandy, not Calais. A place Clarke has intentionally kept quiet on his own maps. A junior officer approaches hesitantly. "Sir, if they see through it at the last moment." "They won't," Clarke says calmly. "But if they do, then thousands of young men will die on those beaches." Silence. Clarke finally turns to him. His eyes are steady, which is why we cannot afford doubt. He gestures toward the pins, toward the phantom divisions, toward the great illusion he has spent his life constructing. Outside, in fields across England, men tighten ropes around inflatable turrets, repaint scuffed plywood wings, adjust lighting to ensure shadows fall correctly at dawn. Because somewhere in occupied Europe, German observers are watching. And they believe every second of it. What Clarke does not yet know is that across the Channel, German high command is already making decisions based on his lies. Decisions that will determine whether D-Day succeeds or collapses into catastrophe. Section 2. The Man Who Sold the Lie. June 6, 1944. Southampton a.m. Dover coastline. The sea below is black glass, broken only by faint moonlight and the distant rhythm of waves. A German listening post sits hidden along the French coast, its operators hunched over headphones in a concrete bunker. Cigarette smoke curls toward the ceiling as pencils scratch across notepads. To them, the war arrives not with explosions, but with voices. Crackling through the static. Unit designations, grid coordinates, requests for fuel, complaints about delays, orders to move trucks at dawn. It sounds real because it is performed by professionals. Not actors, not amateurs, but hand-picked radio specialists trained to mimic the behavior of entire divisions. Each operator has studied the habits of real commanders, the cadence of their speech, the way they hesitate, the way they swear when frustrated, even the rhythm of boredom that creeps into a voice at 3 a.m. This is the invisible side of Clarke's army, the part no reconnaissance camera can photograph, the part that lives entirely inside the enemy's head. Major David Strungewas listens to the broadcasts from a control room in southern England, stopwatch in hand. He was once a combat officer, hard-eyed, blunt, a man who trusts only things he can touch, and when he was first assigned to Clarke's deception unit, he had been openly skeptical. Inflatable tanks, fake radio chatter, ghost divisions. He thought it was lunacy. Now he studies the intercept reports with growing respect. Berlin responded to the last transmission, an intelligence officer says. They repositioned reconnaissance flights toward Kent again. Strungewas taps ash into a tray. Good, keep feeding them. He leans closer to the radio set, listening to the performance unfold. Requesting additional bridging equipment for expected push beyond Calais. Motor pool reports delays. Too many trucks, not enough drivers. Tell headquarters Patton won't accept excuses. It sounds chaotic. Human. Real. Because war is messy, and Clarke has ensured that his phantom army sounds messy too. Strungewas glances at the wall clock. Somewhere else far to the west, real men are climbing into landing craft. Real engines are rumbling. Real fear is tightening in real chests. Normandy is already in motion. And still the radio traffic continues. Because the lie must not falter. In Berlin, the atmosphere is different. Tense, claustrophobic. Maps cover the walls of the Führerhauptquartier. Telephones ring constantly. Officers move quickly, trying to stay one step ahead of a war that no longer obeys German timelines. Colonel Alexis von Runne, head of the German Foreign Army's West Intelligence Division, studies fresh reports. Aerial reconnaissance confirms large concentrations of Allied forces in southeast England. Radio intercepts indicate massive logistical preparations under Patton. Agent reports from occupied territory confirm that local resistance cells have heard rumors of an impending Calais assault. Every piece fits. Perfectly. Too perfectly. But Rohn pushes the thought aside. He has no reason to doubt the data. Because the data has been designed to be believed. He signs off on the assessment. The main Allied invasion will strike at the Pas-de-Calais. The document is sent upward, toward men who will act on it, toward men who will hold back entire panzer divisions because of it. Back in England, Clarke reads the same intercept summary with silent satisfaction. Calais still considered primary threat, an officer reports. German 15th Army remains in position. Clarke nods slowly. The 15th Army is one of Germany's strongest formations in the West. Dozens of thousands of men, tanks, artillery, fortified positions. If they move to Normandy, the beaches will become a slaughterhouse. If they stay, the Allies may survive the landing. Clarke turns to the map again. Everything now depends on timing. The Germans must believe that Normandy, if attacked, is only a diversion, a feint, a secondary operation meant to draw attention away from the real invasion at Calais. So the illusion must continue, even after the first boots hit French sand, especially after morning light creeps over southern England. In a field near Canterbury, a farmer pauses at the edge of his land, staring at the strange sight before him. Dozens of tanks, hundreds of vehicles, a full military encampment stretching beyond the hedgerows. He has seen soldiers before, but never like this. No noise, no shouting, no movement. Just stillness. He squints uneasy. A gust of wind passes through the field. One of the tanks wobbles. Just slightly. He blinks, then turns away quickly. Best not to look too closely. June 6, 1944, 6:31 a.m. Normandy coast. The first landing craft grind against French sand. Machine gun fire tears across the beach. Men fall. Men scream. Men crawl forward through smoke and surf. And above it all, German commanders wait. Wait for confirmation. Wait for clarity. Wait for the real invasion to reveal itself. Reports flood in from Normandy. Large landings, heavy fighting, airborne drops inland. Serious, but not decisive. Not yet, because Berlin is still convinced the main blow is coming elsewhere. Still convinced Patton's army is waiting across from Calais. Still convinced the tanks in England are real. And as the hours pass, a terrible question begins to form in the minds of some German officers. What if this is not a diversion? What if the impossible has already begun? Section 3. The Lie That Would Not Die. June 7, 1944, 9:12 p.m. Führer Headquarters, East Prussia. A heavy door closes with a dull, final sound. Inside the briefing room, the air feels stale. Maps of France are spread across the table. Red grease pencil marks bleed into one another like open wounds. Adolf Hitler sits hunched forward, eyes locked on Normandy. The reports are getting worse. Allied forces have secured multiple beachheads. Airborne troops hold key crossroads. The ports are not yet taken, but the foothold is undeniable. Around him, generals speak carefully, cautiously. No one wants to be the man who delivers unwelcome truth too directly. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt clears his throat. Mein Führer, the scale of the landing suggests this may not be a diversion. Silence. Hitler does not look up. Patton, he says quietly. Where is Patton? No one answers immediately, because that question matters more than all the others. Across the channel in southeast England, George S. Patton stands before a mirror, adjusting his helmet. A photographer waits nearby. A public affairs officer checks his watch. Press will arrive in 3 minutes, sir. Patton nods. His face is stern, almost theatrical. Because he understands his role. He is not here to command troops. He is here to be seen. Seen inspecting men, seen studying maps, seen preparing. Because every photograph that reaches neutral newspapers, every rumor whispered through occupied Europe, every report intercepted by German intelligence, feeds the illusion. Patton turns to the officer. Let's make sure they get my good side. It sounds like a joke. It is. This is theater of the highest order. And somewhere in Berlin, they are still watching him. June 8th, German 15th Army Headquarters, Pas-de-Calais. General Hans von Salmuth stands beside a window, binoculars pressed to his eyes. He scans the gray waters of the channel again. Nothing. No armada, no columns of smoke, no distant thunder of naval guns. Just waves. Behind him, his staff murmurs over fresh intelligence. Radio traffic from England remains heavy, an officer says. They continue to reference large-scale movements. Patton still active, another adds. Reconnaissance confirms vehicle concentrations remain unchanged. Salmuth lowers the binoculars slowly. If Normandy is the real invasion, why has nothing changed here? Why would the Allies leave such a powerful force idle at the decisive moment? It makes no sense. And in war, when something makes no sense, commanders fall back on doctrine, on logic, on expectation. He turns from the window. We hold our positions, he says at last. The main attack is still coming. The order is passed down the line. Panzer divisions remain in place. Reinforcements do not move. And on the beaches of Normandy, exhausted Allied soldiers continue fighting against fewer German reserves than they might have faced. Because of a lie. Back in England, Dudley Clarke listens to the same news with a different emotion. Not relief. Not celebration. Fear. Because deception is fragile. The longer it must hold, the more chances there are for something to unravel. A reconnaissance plane flying too low. A spy who gets too close. A photograph taken at the wrong angle. One mistake and the Germans might see the sagging seams, the ropes, the truth. He studies new reports. German High Command still classifies Normandy as secondary. An intelligence officer says quietly, they believe the primary invasion will follow within days at Calais. Clarke exhales slowly. Days. That is all they need. Just days. June 10th. A German reconnaissance aircraft sweeps low over southern England, camera shutters clicking. The pilot leans forward, peering through the canopy. Below him, endless vehicles, rows of tanks, activity on roads, camps sprawling across the countryside. He photographs everything. Back in France, analysts examine the images. They see tank silhouettes. They see vehicle shadows. They see scale. What they do not see are the thin canvas skins, the lack of tracks, the subtle uniformity that suggests manufacturing, not use. They write their assessment accordingly. The enemy maintains a massive armored force opposite Calais. The report moves upward. Again. June 14th, Normandy. A young Allied lieutenant crouches behind a hedgerow, helmet dented, face smeared with dirt. He has been fighting for days. No sleep, little water, too many dead. He looks at a passing sergeant. Where the hell are the German tanks? He asks. The sergeant hesitates. Intelligence says they're waiting for the second invasion. The lieutenant lets out a humorless laugh. Second invasion. This feels like plenty. He does not know Dudley Clarke. He does not know inflatable tanks. He does not know radio actors and wooden aircraft. He only knows that the enemy resistance, though brutal, is not what it could have been. That somewhere, somehow, the German hammer has not yet fallen. And he lives another day because of it. June 20th, Berlin. The doubt is growing. Too many reports, too much blood, too much evidence that Normandy is not collapsing. Rundstedt speaks again, more firmly this time. Mein Führer, we must release the panzer reserves. Every hour we delay strengthens the enemy. Hitler finally looks up. In Patton, he asks. Still no confirmed movement. Still no photographs of disbanded camps. Still no collapse of the Phantom Army. Hitler leans back slowly. What if, he begins, then stops. The room is silent. For the first time, the unthinkable enters the air. What if the tanks are not real? What if the army does not exist? What if the greatest invasion in history has already happened, and they have been staring at ghosts? The question hangs there, heavy, suffocating. And far across the channel, Dudley Clarke studies his map, unaware that the illusion is beginning to crack. Because the longer the lie survives, the more dangerous the truth becomes. And somewhere inside German High Command, a realization is forming that could change everything. Section 4. The Cracks in the Illusion. June 23, 1944, 4:06, Berlin. Rain taps softly against the windows of the Intelligence Directorate, a quiet, relentless rhythm. Inside, Colonel Alexis von Rohn studies a stack of fresh reports beneath a desk lamp. His eyes burn. He has not slept. Normandy has not collapsed. That is the problem. Instead of being pushed back into the sea, the Allies are expanding, building airfields, landing more men, more tanks, more supplies. The beachhead is no longer a fragile foothold. It is becoming a machine. And yet Patton still has not moved. Von Rohn flips through reconnaissance summaries again. FUSAG remains in place. Radio traffic remains heavy. Camps in Kent and Sussex remain active. Vehicle concentrations remain unchanged. Everything still points to Calais. Everything, except reality. He leans back slowly, staring at the ceiling. If this is the diversion, he murmurs, then it is the most costly diversion in history. A dangerous thought. He does not write it down. June 25th, Southern England. A British private walks the perimeter of a fake encampment with his rifle slung loosely over his shoulder. The morning is quiet, too quiet. He stops beside one of the inflatable tanks and presses his palm lightly against it. Warm from the sun, slightly spongy. Ridiculous when you think about it. This thing, this rubber shell, is supposed to be holding back entire German armies. He steps away, uneasy. A gust of wind sweeps across the field. Canvas flutters. One of the tanks shifts subtly, just enough to make his stomach tighten. Hold together, he mutters under his breath. Not for him. For the men in France. June 27th, Normandy. A German captain peers through his binoculars from behind a shattered wall. Across the hedgerows he can see American vehicles moving freely, engineers laying roads, supply trucks rolling without pause. This is no probing force. This is an army settling in. He lowers the binoculars and turns to his adjutant. Send another report to headquarters, he says. Tell them again. This is the main invasion. The adjutant hesitates. They've ignored the last three, sir. Then send a fourth. His voice is flat. Resigned. Because on the ground, among the men actually fighting, the truth is already obvious. But truth moves slowly through hierarchies, especially when it contradicts everything those hierarchies believe. June 30th, Führer headquarters. Hitler stands before the map now, not sitting. The red and blue markers blur together. Normandy is no longer a question. It is a wound spreading across northern France. Cadel stands nearby, rigid. Jodl flips through reports, his expression tight. Mein Führer, Jodl says carefully. There are increasing indications that the enemy has committed the majority of his strength to Normandy. Hitler does not respond. Additionally, Jodl continues, some commanders are questioning the authenticity of the reported forces in southeast England. That gets a reaction. Hitler turns sharply, questioning. Yes, my Führer, there are inconsistencies, lack of movement, no confirmed embarkation activity. Silence. Heavy, ominous. Hitler stares at the Pas-de-Calais on the map. For weeks he has been holding his best formations there, waiting for Patton, waiting for the hammer blow. What if, he says slowly, Patton is not coming? No one answers, because no one wants to say it aloud. If Patton is not coming, if the army in England is not real, if the tanks are rubber and the radio traffic a performance, then the truth is catastrophic. They have been outplayed, not on the battlefield, but in the mind. July 2nd, Southern England. Dudley Clarke studies the newest intercepts with growing tension. The Germans are hesitating now. Their certainty is fraying. Not breaking, but bending. Reports mention possible deception elements. Analysts in Berlin are starting to argue among themselves. Some still believe fully. Others are beginning to doubt. Clarke rubs his temples. This is the most dangerous phase, when belief turns to suspicion, because suspicion leads to investigation, and investigation leads to discovery. Any change in Patton's perception? Clarke asks quietly. No, sir, an officer replies. They still consider him the key to the main blow. Clarke nods. Good. As long as Patton remains the anchor, the illusion holds. But the clock is running. July 5th, Berlin. A junior intelligence officer lays a set of photographs on the table. Aerial shots of southern England. He points to one image. Here, he says nervously, no track marks behind several armored formations. The spacing is uniform, artificial. A senior officer frowns. You're suggesting the tanks are fake. I'm suggesting, the junior officer swallows, that some of them might be. The room murmurs. The idea is poison. If true, it means they have built strategy on air, on canvas, on shadows. The report is marked concerning, not urgent, not critical, because to escalate it further would mean admitting something no one wants to admit, that the Führer may have been deceived. July 8th, Normandy. An American sergeant watches as fresh reinforcements march past him toward the front. Endless columns. Tanks, trucks, men. He shakes his head slightly. They told us Jerry had more armor, he mutters to himself. He looks out toward the horizon. Maybe they do. Or maybe, just maybe, someone somewhere has kept those tanks locked in place. He doesn't know about Dudley Clarke. He doesn't know about inflatable armies. But he knows this. Every day the Germans hesitate is another day he gets to breathe. Another day he gets to live. July 10th, Führer headquarters. Hitler stands alone now, staring at the map. The truth is pressing in from every side. Normandy is expanding. Calais remains quiet. Patton remains inactive. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he reaches for a pin. A single panzer division. He moves it slightly toward Normandy. It is a small adjustment, but it is the first. The illusion has begun to fail. Not because it was poorly built, but because no lie, no matter how brilliant, can survive forever against reality. And across the channel, Dudley Clarke feels it. He cannot see Berlin. He cannot hear the conversations. He cannot watch the pins move on the map. But he knows. The deception is reaching its limit. The question now is no longer whether the Germans will discover the truth. The question is, have the Allies already gained enough from the lie before it dies? Section 5. The Moment the Ghosts Won. July 14th, 1944, 8:22 p.m. Normandy countryside. Thunder rolls low over the hedgerows, not from the sky but from artillery. A Sherman tank crew huddles beneath wet camouflage netting as shells burst somewhere beyond the fields. The air smells of cordite and damp earth. One of the men, barely 20, grips his helmet tighter every time the ground shudders. Think they'll finally throw everything at us? He asks. The sergeant beside him doesn't answer right away. He listens instead, to the distant guns, to the rhythm of the battle. No, he finally says. If they were going to, they'd have done it by now. The young soldier doesn't understand why that matters. But the sergeant does. Because experienced men know when the enemy is holding back. And in Normandy, the enemy is still holding back. July 15th, Führer headquarters. The map has changed. More red pins have moved toward Normandy now. More divisions are shifting west, but the movement is slow, cautious, reluctant. Hitler still does not release everything. He still fears Patton. He still fears Calais. He still fears the blow that Clarke invented. Field Marshal Wilhelm Cadel stands beside him, voice type. Main Führer, the commanders in France are requesting full freedom of movement. They say the enemy's strength is growing beyond their capacity to contain. Hitler nods slowly, eyes fixed on the Channel coast. And if we release everything and then Patton lands behind them? No one answers. Because that is the trap. That is the brilliance of the deception. The Germans are no longer deciding how to defeat the enemy. They are deciding which catastrophe to choose. July 18th, Southern England. Dudley Clarke walks alone through one of the fake encampments. The tanks still stand. The trucks still sit in neat rows. The aircraft still rest on their wooden frames. The illusion is intact to the eye. But he knows appearances are no longer enough. He stops beside an inflatable Sherman and studies it quietly. Months of work, thousands of small decisions, endless rehearsals, endless refinements. All to delay. Not defeat. Not victory. Delay. Delay long enough for real men to gain real ground. He places his hand briefly against the rubber hull. Hold, he murmurs softly, just a little longer. July 20th, Berlin. A bomb explodes inside the wolf's lair. Chaos erupts, smoke, shouting, confusion. The attempt on Hitler's life fails, but its consequences ripple through every level of German command. Paranoia explodes, trust collapses, officers are arrested, executed, silenced. And in the middle of this political earthquake, strategic clarity becomes almost impossible. Reports from France pile up, contradictions, desperation, pleas for reinforcements. But the command structure is now fractured. Fear replaces analysis. And in that fear, the deception lives longer than it should. Because no one wants to bring bad news. No one wants to admit they may have been fooled. No one wants to be the man who says, "The army you feared never existed." July 25th, Normandy, Operation Cobra begins. The sky itself seems to tear open. American bombers roar overhead in waves, dropping thousands of tons of explosives onto German positions. Entire defensive lines disintegrate in fire and dust. On the ground, infantry surge forward behind the shock. German units, already stretched thin, begin to crack. A German lieutenant stumbles through smoke and debris, blood in his eyes, radio pressed to his ear. "We need armored support," he shouts. Immediately. Static answers him. There is no armored support. Not enough. Not here. Not now. Because for weeks, too many German tanks have been sitting idle near Calais. Waiting. For ghosts. July 28th, Führer headquarters. Hitler finally slams his fist against the table. "The reserves must move," he snaps, "all of them at once." The order comes too late. The Allies have broken out. American forces are no longer pinned in the hedgerows. They are racing across open countryside, capturing towns, seizing bridges, encircling German units. The moment for decisive German counterattack has passed. Not by days, by weeks. Weeks bought by rubber, canvas, radio voices, and the mind of a thin British officer who never fired a shot in anger. August 1st, Southern England. Dudley Clarke receives the final assessment. The deception is no longer necessary. German forces have committed to Normandy. The threat of a second invasion at Calais has effectively collapsed. Operation Fortitude has achieved its purpose. He reads the document slowly. There is no cheering, no applause, no celebration, just a long, quiet exhale. Around him, His staff look to his face for some sign of triumph. He gives them none, because he knows what this success represents. Not glory, not pride, but absence. The absence of thousands of deaths that never happened. The battles that were never fought. The counterattacks that never came. The sons who went home because panzer divisions stayed parked, waiting for an army that did not exist. August 10th, Normandy. A British medic sits beside a wounded soldier under a tree. The man's breathing is ragged, but he is alive. The medic tightens a bandage and speaks quietly, almost to himself. "You're lucky," he says, "real lucky." The soldier manages a weak smile. "Don't feel lucky." The medic glances toward the distant horizon, where the front has already moved on. "Trust me," he says softly, "you are." He does not know about Dudley Clarke. He does not know about inflatable tanks. He does not know about phantom armies. He only knows that somehow, against all odds, the Germans did not throw everything they had at these beaches. And that somehow was enough. But far away, in England, a man who never touched a rifle understands exactly why. And he understands something else too. The war is not over. But the turning point has already passed. Because the ghosts have done their work. Section 6. The Quiet Victory. August 18, 1944, 6:40 a.m. Normandy. A low fog clings to the fields outside Calais. German soldiers move through it like shadows, exhausted, starving, hunted. They are no longer fighting for victory. They are fighting to escape. A corporal stumbles along a dirt road, boots soaked, rifle hanging uselessly from his shoulder. Around him, broken units drift without cohesion. No orders, no structure, no plan. He looks back once toward the east, toward Germany, then forward again, toward captivity. The encirclement is closing. The Allies call it the Falaise Pocket. Inside it are the shattered remains of what was once the German 7th Army. Tens of thousands of men, destroyed, trapped, finished. This is not just defeat. This is collapse. And it began weeks earlier, not with bombs, not with tanks, but with a lie. August 21st, Southern England. Dudley Clarke sits alone at his desk, the morning light spilling across stacks of papers. Operation Fortitude files. Intercept summaries. Deception plans. False orders. Phantom movements. The architecture of a ghost war. He flips through them slowly. There is no satisfaction in his expression, only distance, reflection. A junior officer stands hesitantly in the doorway. "Sir, they're saying in France that the Germans never recovered from holding back their reserves." Clarke does not look up. "They shouldn't have recovered." The officer swallows. "They're calling it decisive." Clarke finally lifts his eyes. "Decisive," he repeats quietly. The word feels heavy, because he knows what decisive truly means. It means that somewhere, a German division stayed still when it should have moved. That somewhere, a panzer commander waited for orders that never came. That somewhere a counterattack was planned and then canceled. It means that real men lived because imaginary men existed. September 1st, 1944, Berlin. The atmosphere is hollow now. No confidence. No certainty. No illusions left to cling to. Inside an intelligence office, a German analyst stares at old reports. Photographs of tank parks in England. Transcripts of intercepted radio traffic. Maps filled with red arrows toward Calais. He knows now. He sees it all clearly. The neat spacing, the lack of wear, the artificial consistency. He presses his fingers to his temples. They were never real, he whispers. Weeks, months, entire strategies constructed on ghosts. Outside, distant air raid sirens begin to wail. And this time, the threat is real. September 10th, France. An American captain stands on a hill overlooking a newly liberated town. Children run in the streets. French flags hang from windows. Civilians cheer as convoys roll through. He watches it quietly. A lieutenant approaches. Hard to believe how fast everything collapsed once we broke out. The captain nods, yeah. He thinks of the early days, the fear, the uncertainty, the belief that at any moment German armor might appear in overwhelming force. But it never came. Not in the numbers they expected. Not with the weight that might have crushed them. He doesn't know why. But he knows the result. They are standing here instead of buried on a beach. October 1944, London. Dudley Clarke walks across Westminster Bridge, coat collar turned up against the wind. People pass him without a glance. No salutes. No recognition. No applause. And that is how it must be. The work he did cannot be celebrated publicly. The success of deception depends on silence. History will remember generals. It will remember battles. It will remember dates and maps and speeches. It will not remember inflatable tanks. It will not remember radio actors. It will not remember the careful placement of shadows in empty fields. It will not remember him. He pauses midway across the bridge and looks out over the Thames. Gray water, gray sky, the city alive behind him. Somewhere in France, men are still fighting. Somewhere in Germany, cities are still burning. The war continues, but its outcome is no longer in doubt. Not after Normandy. Not after the breakout. Not after the collapse that followed. And he knows with quiet certainty that his ghosts helped make that possible. Years later, when fragments of the story finally emerge, when files are unsealed and operations named, historians will struggle to explain it. How an army that never existed held back real divisions. How a general who never commanded troops led the enemy's strategy. How rubber, wood, and sound convinced the most paranoid regime on earth that what it feared most was just beyond the horizon. They will call it one of the greatest deceptions in military history. They will call it brilliant. They will call it audacious. They will call it impossible. But Dudley Clarke would have used a simpler word. Necessary. Because on June 6, 1944, when real men ran into real gunfire on real beaches, the only reason they were not met by everything Germany had was because, across the channel, an army of ghosts was standing perfectly still. End